There is a hotel in Carmel, by the sea, California, that has had the same guest check-in on the last weekend of October for 11 consecutive years. Same room, same weekend, same quiet arrival, no car announced, no assistant with luggage, no one holding a clipboard at the door. The staff who have been there long enough know the name before they see the face. They know what he orders from room service, and what he does not want disturbed in the morning, and which path he takes when he walks down to the beach at 7 o'clock. They know these things because someone who is good at their job told someone who is just learning theirs, and the knowledge passed the way knowledge passes in a well-run hotel, quietly, in advance, before the guest arrives, so that when the guest arrives it feels like they have been expected. This year, the staff who have been there long enough are gone. New ownership took over in September. New management followed. New front-of-house team, new protocols, new culture. 11 years of accumulated knowledge about a quiet man who checks in on the last weekend of October was not transferred. Nobody thought to transfer it. That was the first mistake. The second mistake was made on a Friday afternoon in the last week of October, when a man in a dark jacket and worn jeans walked up to the check-in desk at the Cypress Gate Hotel in Carmel by the sea and was treated the way the new front-of-house team had been trained to treat guests who arrived without signals. Correctly. Professionally. Without any of the recognition that 11 years of the same weekend had built. Because the people who had built it were no longer there to provide it. He did not say anything about it. Not that evening. Not the following morning. Not until he checked out on Sunday, when he left something at the desk that was not a complaint form, and not a gratuity, and not a note to the manager. It was a letter. 2 pages. Handwritten. What was in that letter, and what the new general manager did with it, and what the hotel looked like 6 months later, is a story about the specific, compounding cost of losing what you did not know you had. There is a hotel called the Cypress Gate on Ocean Avenue in Carmel by the sea, California, at the corner of Ocean and Junipero, in a building that has occupied that corner for 61 years, and that has been, for most of those 61 years, the kind of hotel that guests return to rather than discover. The building is Spanish colonial in style, painted white with terracotta trim, with a courtyard garden that is visible from the street through a wrought iron gate that is the thing most people photograph when they photograph the hotel, and that gives it its name. The rooms number 32. None of them have televisions, which is a deliberate policy that the previous ownership maintained for 22 years and that the new ownership has not yet changed, because the reviews that mention it are uniformly positive, and changing it would require an explanation to every reviewer who comes next. The beds have wool blankets, not duvets. The bathroom tiles are original to the 1963 renovation, a warm terracotta that has come back into style without the hotel having to do anything to bring it back. Carmel by the Sea is the kind of town that the Cypress Gate fits without effort. The town has had, since its founding by artists and writers in the early 20th century, a settled relationship with a certain kind of beauty, the kind that is quiet and specific and does not announce itself. The village has no streetlights, which means that the nights there are darker than you expect, and the stars over the water are visible in a way they are not visible in most places along this stretch of coast. Dogs are allowed on the beach. The restaurants close early. The bookshops are the kind that have been there for 30 years and intend to be there for 30 more. The previous owners of the Cypress Gate were a couple named Dorothea and Frank Aldrin, who had bought the hotel in 1998 and had run it for 25 years with the specific philosophy that a hotel's primary job was to know its guests well enough that the guests did not have to introduce themselves every time. They had succeeded at this. They had a guest book that they had maintained since 2001, a physical book, hardcover, kept behind the front desk, in which they had recorded, for every returning guest, the details that mattered: room preference, dietary notes, the name of the dog if a dog came, the reason for the visit if the guest had mentioned one, the things that had made previous stays work. The book had 23 years of entries. When the Aldrins sold in September, the book stayed behind the front desk. The new general manager, who arrived in October with 2 weeks before the first major fall weekend, had not been told about the book. He had not been told because the Aldrins, who had been scrupulous about the handover of physical assets and financial records, had not thought to explain a physical book as an asset. It was, to them, simply the way they worked. It had not occurred to them that a general manager might not understand its value. The book sat behind the front desk. Nobody opened it. His name was Derek Ferris, and he had managed boutique hotels for 11 years, which was enough time to have developed strong opinions about how they should be run, and insufficient time to have learned that the strongest opinions in hospitality are often the ones most wrong about the specific hotel they are being applied to. He was 42 years old. He had come from a property in Monterey, a larger boutique, 60 rooms, a restaurant attached, a spa that had been added in 2018 and that had improved the revenue numbers while, in Derek's private assessment, somewhat diluting the identity of the place. He had left because the ownership in Monterey had priorities he did not share, and because the Cypress Gate had been described to him. In the conversation where the new owners made their pitch, as a blank page, a property with bones and location and a reputation, ready to be taken somewhere new. He had taken the description at face value. The blank page was not blank. It had 11 years of a particular guest's check-in on the last weekend of October, among many other things, written in ink in a book he had not opened. Derek had grown up in Sacramento, which was a city where the hotels he had grown up aware of were the kind that served conventions and business travel and the airport-adjacent overnight stay. Places that were efficient and interchangeable, and that rewarded the kind of management that was also efficient and interchangeable. His mother had managed the front desk at a Holiday Inn for 14 years, which was where he had learned to love the operational side of hospitality, the systems, the protocols, the precise choreography of a well-run check-in. What he had not fully learned, in Sacramento or in the 11 years since, was the difference between a system that serves the guest and a system that serves the system. In a convention hotel, the difference barely mattered. Every guest was a first-time guest, or might as well be. The system was the relationship. In a hotel like the Cypress Gate, the system was the scaffolding. The relationship was the building. He had not understood this distinction when he arrived. He was beginning to understand it now. In the specific way you understand things when they cost you something, from the inside, after the fact, when the bill has already arrived. The man checked in on Friday afternoon at 4:15. The front desk associate was a young woman named Sophie, 24 years old, 6 weeks into her first hospitality job after a degree in communications from a university in San Jose. She was good at what she had been trained to do. She was warm and professional, and she followed the check-in protocol that Derek had implemented in his first week, a protocol modeled on the Monterey property, which was competent and complete, and which treated every arriving guest as someone to be processed into the system with accuracy and pleasantness. She processed him with accuracy and pleasantness. She asked his name. He gave it. She found the reservation. She assigned him a room. She asked if he had stayed with them before. He said yes. she said. Wonderful. Is there anything specific that would make your stay more comfortable? It was the right question. It was on the protocol card. He looked at her for a moment. He said, Not that I can think of. He took the key. He thanked her by name, which she noted because not everyone looked at the nameplate, and went up. Sophie turned back to her screen. She had no way of knowing that the question she had asked, "Is there anything specific that would make your stay more comfortable?" was, to the man who had just answered it, the exact question that should not have needed asking after 11 years of the same weekend in the same room in the same hotel. Not because the question was wrong. Because the question meant that nobody knew the answer. He came down for dinner at 7 and ate at the restaurant adjacent to the hotel, which was not affiliated with the Cypress Gate, but which the previous staff had always mentioned because the previous staff had known he preferred it to the hotel's own limited service. The new staff had not mentioned it because the new staff had not known to. He found it himself. He ordered the halibut. He ate alone, which was how he always ate when he came to Carmel, because Carmel was the place he came to be alone, and being alone here had never felt like something to manage or explain. He walked down to the beach afterward, in the dark, on the path that ran along the end of Ocean Avenue and opened onto the sand. The stars were out in the way they were out on the Carmel coast in October, fully, without competition, the way they are when a town has decided not to fight them with its own light. He stood for a while. He came back. He passed the front desk. A different associate was on the night shift, a man named Paul, who had been at the Cypress Gate for 4 months, and who had been briefed by Derek to maintain the check-in protocol at all hours and to offer assistance proactively. Paul offered assistance. The man said goodnight and went up. On Saturday morning, he ordered breakfast from room service at 7:30. The person taking the order asked what he would like, which was the correct question, and which was also the question that the previous room service staff would not have needed to ask, because they would have seen the name on the order and known. He ordered coffee and eggs. He ate on the small terrace outside his room, facing the courtyard garden, where the bougainvillea that Dorothea Aldrin had planted in 2004 was in the last of its fall color, which was the specific reason he had first come to this hotel in October, and the specific thing he had never mentioned to anyone because some reasons do not require mentioning. Saturday afternoon, he walked. Saturday evening, he had dinner at the same restaurant. He came back at 9:30. Sophie was back on the evening shift, and she asked if he had enjoyed the day, which was on the protocol card as a check-in question, and which was the kind of question that, at the Cypress Gate, as the Aldrins had run it, would have been a continuation of a conversation rather than the opening of one. He said he had. He said it in the voice of someone answering a question that is correct and insufficient simultaneously. He went up. He checked out on Sunday morning at 10. Sophie was at the desk. He set his key cards down. He said, "Thank you for a pleasant stay." She said, "We're so glad. We hope to see you again." He said, "I'd like to leave something." She said, "Of course." He reached into the inside pocket of the dark jacket, the same jacket he had arrived in, because the jacket was the jacket, and had been for a long time, and took out a folded envelope. He set it on the desk. He said, "For the general manager, please, when you have a moment." She said, "Of course. Can I ask what it relates to so I can direct it appropriately?" He said, "It's a letter about the hotel." She said, "A concern?" He considered the word. He said, "An observation." He thanked her again. He picked up his bag. He walked out through the wrought iron gate and into the Carmel morning. He did not look back. Sophie put the envelope on Derek Ferris's desk at 10:15, with a note that said, "Guest observation letter, departed 10 a.m. Sunday." Derek found it at 11:30, when he came in for the week's debrief with his department heads. He read it before the debrief began. The letter was 2 pages, handwritten, in a hand that was clean and unhurried, and that filled the pages without cramping. It was not a complaint. It said, at the start, "I want to be clear that this is not a complaint about the service I received. The service was correct and professional throughout. What I want to describe is something more specific than a complaint, and I want to describe it because I think it matters for this hotel in particular." It said, "I have stayed in room 12 at the Cypress Gate on the last weekend of October for 11 years. I began coming because of the bougainvillea in the courtyard garden, which I saw from the street on a drive through Carmel in 2013, and which was, at that time, in exactly the October color it is in right now. I stopped and asked if they had a room. They did. I came back the following year, and the year after that, and eventually the staff knew why I was there and what I needed, and the weekend became a thing I relied on in the way that a person relies on the things that restore them." It said, "This past weekend, none of that was present. The staff were kind. They were professional. They asked the right questions, but they asked them because they were on a protocol card, not because they knew me. And a hotel that asks the right questions from a protocol card is a different thing from a hotel that already knows the answers." It said, "Behind your front desk there is a book. It was there when I checked in and when I checked out. I have seen it on the desk many times over 11 years. I do not know if anyone has opened it since September. I think that book may be the most valuable thing currently in this hotel, and I think it is sitting unopened behind a desk." It said, "I am telling you this not to make a claim on a past that may no longer be recoverable, but because the Aldrins built something specific here over 25 years, and I think it is worth knowing what you inherited before deciding whether to keep it." It said, "At the end, I will not be returning next October, unless the letter has mattered. Not as a threat, simply because the specific thing I came for would not be here, and I would rather find it elsewhere than come back and confirm that it is gone." The letter was signed with his full name. Derek Ferris read it twice. He put it down. He looked at his desk. He called Sophie in. He said, "The book behind the front desk. The old hardcover. Has anyone looked at it?" Sophie said she didn't know what book he meant. He said, "Go look." She went. She came back. She put the book on his desk. He opened it. He read for 40 minutes. He read the way a person reads when they understand, with increasing clarity, that they have arrived somewhere they did not know existed, and that the arrival has come at a cost they did not know they were paying. 23 years of entries. Handwritten in Dorothea Aldrin's precise cursive and, more recently, in the rounder hand of whoever had been taking the later entries. Names, room preferences, dietary notes, dogs' names, reasons for visiting, when mentioned. The small specific things that, accumulated over visits and years, constituted not a database, but a relationship. The entry for the last weekend of October, every year for 11 years, was one of the longer ones. Room 12. Coffee and eggs at 7:30. The path to the beach in the evening. No disturbance before 9. The bougainvillea. The halibut at the restaurant on 5th. The anniversary of something that the entry did not name and that had been noted, in Dorothea's handwriting, simply as the reason for October. Derek closed the book. He sat with it for a while. Then he did something that was not in any protocol he had been trained on, and that he had not expected to do when he came to work that morning. He picked up a pen and a piece of the hotel's stationery, and he wrote a letter back. The return letter took 3 drafts. The first draft was too explanatory. Too much about the transition, the new ownership, the circumstances that had led to the book being unread. He threw it out. The second draft was too apologetic, too much about what he should have done, and not enough about what he intended to do. He threw that one out too. The third draft said, "The book was there. You were right that no one had opened it. I have opened it now. I read the entry for the last weekend of October for 11 years. I understand what was absent from this past weekend. I cannot give it back to you for the weekend that is past. I can tell you that it will be present for every weekend going forward, for every guest in that book, and every guest who comes after them, because I now understand what this hotel is, and I did not understand it when I arrived." It said, "The Bougainvillea will be in the same color next October. Room 12 will be available. If you come back, you will not be asked what would make your stay more comfortable. We will already know." It was signed with his name and his title. He sealed it. He found the address from the reservation file. He mailed it. He spent the following week doing 2 things. The first was reading the book, not skimming. Reading, the way you read something you should have read before you changed anything, which is the specific reading that costs the most attention because it is always too late and always worth doing anyway. He read every entry. He made notes. He cross-referenced with the reservation history he had inherited from the Aldrin's booking system, which gave him 11 years of data points that now had context they had not had before. The second was training his staff, not with a new protocol card. With the book, he brought Sophie and Paul and the room service team and the housekeeping lead into the small meeting room off the lobby, and he put the book on the table, and he told them what was in it and why it mattered. He told them about the letter. He did not read the letter aloud. That felt like a violation of something. He told them what it contained, in the same way you summarize a private thing that needs to be known without being reproduced. Sophie asked if she should have looked at the book when she was trained. He said, "I should have shown it to you. That's on me, not on you." She said, "What do we do when someone new comes in?" "Someone who's not in the book?" He said, "You start a new entry." She said, "Now?" "For everyone?" He said, "For everyone who comes back." He paused. He said, "The people in this book came back 11, 15, 22 times. They came back because someone was paying attention. You can't read the attention off a protocol card. You have to build it." He tapped the book. "This is what it looks like when you've built it," he said. We start over. The Cypress Gate, under Derek Ferris's management, did not become a different hotel in 6 months. 6 months is not enough time to become a different hotel. What it became in 6 months was a hotel that was paying attention in the way it had paid attention before September. Imperfectly in the early months. Because paying attention is a skill, and skills are built by repetition, and the repetition had to begin again from the beginning. Sophie started a new section of the book, fresh pages in the same hardcover. Her handwriting lighter and rounder than Dorothea Aldrin's, but carrying the same intention. She had a system for noting the small things. She kept a notepad at the desk and transferred entries at the end of each shift. A practice that took her 7 minutes and that she had not been asked to do, but that she had understood, after the meeting with the book on the table, was the job. Paul started doing the same on the night shift. The room service team asked Derek if they should note preferences too. He said yes. The book grew. The letter arrived at a house in the Hollywood Hills on a Thursday morning in November. He read it the way he had read the return entries in the Cypress Gate book, which is to say that he had never seen the book. But the letter had the quality of something that had been written after a significant act of reading, and he recognized that quality. He read it twice. He put it on the desk in his reading room, beside the catalogs from Ojai, which he had been working through slowly on the mornings when he was home and had the time. He did not write back. He did not need to. There was a reservation for the last weekend of October, next year. It had been in the system since July. He arrived on Friday afternoon at 4:15. Sophie was at the desk. She looked up when he came in. She said, "Welcome back, Mr. Reeves. Room 12 is ready. Breakfast tomorrow at 7:30? He looked at her. He said, "Please." She handed him the key. She did not read it from a card. I have been thinking about something I did not expect to think about when I started telling this story. I expected to think about the letter, about the specific, clear-eyed generosity of a person who, after being disappointed, chose to explain the disappointment rather than simply not return. That is a form of kindness that most of us do not practice. The version where you tell someone what they have lost before they have finished losing it. But what I keep coming back to is the book. 23 years of entries. The dogs' names. The reason for October, noted without elaboration. Dorothea Aldrin's precise cursive and the rounder hand of whoever came after. The specific, accumulated knowledge of what it means to someone to be known by a place. This is what businesses lose when they change. Not the furniture. Not the protocols, not the brand. The book. The knowledge that was never formalized because the people who held it did not think of it as a system. They thought of it as simply knowing. And what Derek Ferris did, reading it, not skimming it, putting it on the table in the meeting room and telling his staff what was in it and why, is the thing I find most worth noting. Not the brilliant management decision, the 40 minutes of reading what he should have read in September, and then doing something with it. Most of us have a book like that somewhere. In a hotel, in a business, in a relationship, in a family. A record of the specific knowledge that accumulated when someone was paying attention. Most of us do not open it until after we have needed it. Some of us open it then. The ones who do are the ones who can write. Room 12 will be available. You will not be asked what would make your stay more comfortable. We will already know. That sentence is worth the cost of learning it. This story is fictional, inspired by Keanu Reeves' well-known reputation for the quiet loyalty of a person who returns, year after year, to the places and people that have earned it. If something in this one stayed with you, drop a comment and tell me what you took from it. Share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Subscribe if you want to be here for the next one. See you in the next one.